Okay, good morning, everyone. Just for your information, you can either have your camera on or off, but we have muted you for the start of the session. And also we are recording the session, so if you're comfortable with that, that's good. So we have had about 20 people register, so we're expecting a few more online, but we don't want to start too late. So what we might do is perhaps get into it. This is the third of a series of webinars that we've had about plastic sleeves, about plastics, and this third webinar is on plastic sleeves, looking at some of the challenges and opportunities. And as you see it as we go, we don't have all the solutions, so we're hoping that this will be much more of a discussion and opportunity for people to explore the issue and ask questions and see what we might collaboratively be able to focus on. So before we get into the main part of the session, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the countries from which we all meet. I'm on Wurundjeri country, and I'd like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So as mentioned, this session on plastic sleeves, we have assembled an excellent panel of speakers. I'll be just providing an introduction to the project and why we're here today. We then have Rita Feldmann from the Sustainable Floristry Network, who's going to give an overview of plastic sleeves in the industry. Yasmin Wessels will be providing a bit of an example from a New Zealand experience around how they're managing plastic sleeves. And also we have Ingrid Padovano, who will be talking about the real life experience from the Jonima Flowers experience. Thanks, Ellie. So just to get into the background of why we're even running this project, the project is funded or supported by AgriFutures and the New South Wales government under the Storm and Flood Industry Recovery Program. And so there was an interest from a few years ago after those major floods to ensure that the cut flower industry was well able to deal with those events, and in particular considering chemical use and also plastics on farm. So the plastic sleeve issue is one that goes through the whole supply chain, but it was certainly recognised by the industry as being an on-farm issue and something that they wanted to address. The focus that we've had has been in New South Wales. As you see, the New South Wales government is contributing most of the funding. And so because of that, we worked with a number of the flower grower associations in New South Wales, the Flower Growers Group in New South Wales, the Wildflowers Australia, Sustainable Floristry Network, and Protected Cropping Australia. And the focus was very much about supporting a more sustainable and resilient flower industry, protecting the environment, particularly when we have flood events and we have chemicals and plastics flowing into waterways, and also creating a safer product for florists and consumers. As I mentioned, the two key focus areas were chemicals and plastics, and we have done a number of activities in that chemical area, including workshops, fact sheets, and webinars as well. So the focus for us now has been very much around plastics. As you can see, when we're talking about plastics, it's really trying to focus on minimising that pollution of waterways and soil. We know that a lot of on-farm plastics also break down in the soil, so we're very much focused on how do we reduce that by working through the waste hierarchy. We also, rather than just focusing on recycling, are really great opportunities to reduce the reliance on plastics. And so we're always thinking about alternative types of production methods that could be cover cropping or other methods where you don't need to use plastics. And of course, the end of life solutions is really critical. How do we reuse and recycle? And I think the cut flower industry is a great example where reusing is really part of how people do things. So it's certainly part of the DNA of the industry. It's just promoting some of those opportunities and also promoting some of the recycling opportunities. As mentioned, for the plastic side of things, we have a number of resources, fact sheets, and then these 3-part webinars. We have a lot of those resources on our website, and we'll provide the information around that later on. So when we're talking about managing waste, it's always about looking at examples of how we can move up the waste hierarchy. For example, with the avoid using plastic wrapping, and when possible, avoid using plastic sleeves, which is the topic of today's discussion. Reducing, making sure that our equipment is well maintained and is good quality, and is also designed for a long lifespan. Reusing, as I said, there's examples where the industry is very creative in reusing material. And then recycling. And we have a number of programs already in place, such as Drum Muster, the Plastic Smart program, and also Big Bag Recovery. What we don't want is disposal, where we have, at best, plastic going to landfill, at worst, stockpiling on site or burning and burying. Thanks, Ellie. When we looked at the cut flower industry, we sort of did a bit of an assessment of the key plastics that we used in the industry and came up with the priority of plastics. So the main ones were pots and propagation trays, crates, irrigation piping, plastic flower sleeves, and chemical containers. And we know that there's solutions for some of those products, particularly the pots and propagation trays and the chemical containers. Just a very high overview of the different types of plastics. It's really important to understand that there's so many different, I guess, chemical composition of plastics, and this diagram highlights the different plastic products, but also the different polymers that are used to produce those products. And it's important when you're recycling that you're recycling the same polymers. So you can see that films, so greenhouse skins, for example, and plastic wraps could be LDPE, so low density polyethylene, or polypropylene, and they don't people don't like recycling those products together. Okay, thanks, Ellie. And this is just a QR code for our website, where we have the webinars, podcasts, and some fact sheets and videos available for you to download and peruse. So I might hand over now to Rita Feldmann, who's going to talk about the problems, solutions, and opportunities for the sleeves. Thanks.
Thanks, Anne-Maree. Thanks, everybody, for listening today. This is obviously a bit of a topic that a lot of people are interested in the industry. Why am I speaking today? Basically, I'm from the Sustainable Floristry Network, and we're an education organisation for florists. And we look at it's sort of developed out of interest in the waste issues associated with floristry. And in 2020, I got together with a soft plastics expert and to look at this particular issue of creating a solution to the plastic flower sleeves problem. And so much of this presentation is about looking at the sort of thinking and the evolution of that problem. So there weren't always sleeves. That's an important point, I think, to note. These images are from the mid-70s. This is a family business, our family business. And what you can see in these pictures is what we're seeing are a lot of field-grown flowers, seasonal outdoor field-grown flowers, and absolutely no sleeves. Back then, if there was any packaging, it was generally newspaper, cardboard boxes, wooden boxes often still, but very rarely were sleeves used, and if they were, it was generally for just things like roses. Today's a little bit different. Today, if you walk into a wholesaler or environment or even a retail environment, you'll often see a lot of plastic sleeves. And there's a reason for this. What's changed? So during the 80s and 90s, we saw a big shift in the industry and it grew a lot. One of the things that happened that we saw a change in the types of flowers being grown with an emphasis on premium lines. You can see in the image on the left, there's tulips and hyacinths, and they're being grown from bulbs which are being imported from the Netherlands and grown in growing systems that have a lot of investment in the infrastructure. Also gerbras on the right image, glasshouse systems, roses, glasshouse systems. There was a lot of investment put into growing in Australia. We also saw the expansion of supply chains. So whereas once in the previous image, we'd go to the grower, pick up the flowers, go to the market, pick up the flowers, take them back to the retail environment. Now flowers are moving around a lot more, and we'll see flowers being moved interstate a lot more. And of course, we're importing a lot more flowers in Australia. So just generally, they're moving around. Also, we saw the expansion of supermarkets becoming a big retail outlet. Sleeves, the increase in sleeves, therefore, the main role is protection. Within the wholesale environment, there's a lot of packaging involved, putting into bins, boxes. If you see how the bins and these things are packaged, you see that they play a role in protection. And obviously, we want to prevent breakage and waste, because that's not only money, but it's resources as well. And so, yes, so there's a lot of movement. So you go from the farm often to a wholesaler, then we go to a retailer, and of course, the end of the chain is the consumer. In the retail environment, the sleeves also play a role. If you work in florists, you know, or you could even sort of self-serve type environments, customers will come along, they'll take a bunch out, they'll put it back, they'll take it out, put it back, and there's a lot of movement and opportunity for breakage there. The sleeves also provide a surface for branding for growers, so they can communicate the farm or the origins. In this case, you can see in the sleeves they're stating Australian grown, and some growers choose to put that on because we don't have country of origin labelling on flowers in the same way that we do with fruit and vegetables in Australia. So next slide. So we know that they play a very useful role in along these supply chains, but ultimately they're still a single-use plastic, and this is still very much what we call a linear system for these products. So they're being manufactured, but ultimately they're ending up in disposal. And that supply chain starts with, the petrochemical manufacturer. They move to the grower where they're used, and they either end up they're disposed at 3 points, either by wholesalers who are removing the sleeves to re-sleeve. So, and that's often the case with a lot of imported flowers, or wholesalers who may have rebunching or mixed bunching setups, retailers who are florists and businesses and events, you're taking them off obviously to make flowers up. A lot of florists with bricks and mortar shops will remove the sleeves for display. And then obviously if they're going home with the consumer, they're being taken off there and being put in whatever system, whether they're collecting soft plastics or going to landfill. But for the majority of these, they are currently going to landfill. Next sleeve, please. So what are the options working through the waste hierarchy? Well, at the top, will always be to avoid the use or reduce where possible. And sleeves are not used for all varieties. You'll see a lot of hardier varieties, foliage, native varieties, and in this case, you've got a whole heap of leucodendron. They don't require that protection. So it's only certain varieties. So not using wherever possible is obviously the best choice. The next choice is to, also as part of that reduction in using materials, is using different materials. So in this case, we've got 2 rose growers who have opted to use paper sleeves for clients who are picking up from the farm, but they can't send them to wholesalers, again for the reasons that they're moved around too much and there's all these opportunities for breakage and waste. So if you move down the hierarchy, you can look at reuse. Now, the problem is they're not really designed for reuse. In this image, it's a situation where a florist is reusing them once, which is great because often you need to do some sort of packaging around wet packaging for flowers. So it's sort of just extending the time that they make it into the disposal system or they go to waste. It's better than not using them, but it's still not a system that is designed for reuse. And so that's usually what is referred to when we're talking about reuse in plastics. So recycling. There is a case for recycling in sleeves. And there's a few arguments there. One of them is they are very much an embedded piece of equipment in the industry, so they're not going to disappear. There's always going to be a need for some sort of protection for flowers. The second thing is they are made of polypropylene, and that has certain features. It's clear, it's slippery, so you can move bunches and they're not grabbing on each other, and it's strong. And we discovered that they were polypropylene. It was when I got together with Edward Whitehead, who helped to develop the recycling scheme. It's a really good example of how these sort of systems develop. Here's somebody who is a soft plastics expert, absolutely no involvement with the flower industry, steps into it and applies an external lens to a problem. And he walked around a wholesaler with me one day and he was touching all the sleeves and he said, these are all polypropylene. Now, I'd never heard of that before, and it was news. And he said, look, this is all it's highly recyclable. It is a single type it's a monomer, so it's a type of plastic. It's a soft plastic, so often soft plastics aren't recycled, but here was a situation where there were a lot of one type of product sort of in the one spot. But he also pointed out it had a lot of value for recyclers because it was very, very clear. And then we went about calculating volumes to see whether a recycling system would be viable. And we did that by surveying all the major growers, calculating volumes, weights, and we came to a figure that there's about 500 tonnes of polypropylene in circulation in the cut flower industry in Australia each year. So then we had to think about how do you capture it. So we have a great circular system in operation in the flower industry already, and that is with buckets. So anybody knows that you pick up your flowers from your supplier, take them back to your retail with the flowers in it, and you return the buckets to the wholesaler. So that became almost like a frame that we could follow because the wholesalers worked out to be the best collection point should we set up this recycling system. We realised that there were 2 lots of that along that collection, along the life cycle that we could capture, and they were with wholesalers and with retailers. And it's just speaking to that last slide. It was going to be difficult to get to consumers, but at least we knew that there was a large amount there, so we could tackle a significant portion of the problem. what are we aiming for if we're developing a recycling system? We want to close the loop. We want to create a circular system. And in an ideal situation, we're taking old sleeves and we're turning them back. After being used, they're turning back into a polymer and they're recreating new sleeves out of the old sleeve material. That's a truly closed loop or a circular system. But when we looked at the systems that we could join up with here in Australia, we had the recyclers, we had the users, but we were missing manufacturers. So the first option was, what's the best recycler to approach with a recycling program? So we found a recycler who was involved in the horticulture system and manufacturing buckets. So it was the perfect solution, and they were very enthusiastic and came on board because they could see there was enormous value in having this clear material incorporated into a recycling system. And then we set about a pilot. We engaged a group of about 10 florists and wholesalers. Everybody was on board. We got the Melbourne market interested in the program. And everyone that we approached was really enthusiastic about being involved in this program. We had the material assessed and most importantly, it passed contamination rates for what was required for effective recycling. And that included both other plastics and organic material that got caught up in it. Trialled a system of bins and bags and collection. We had a website running for the program. And we were very involved in the communication. I visited the florists. I explained to them what we wanted to do. The Tulip Garden in Monbulk was a collection point for that material. And it was a very, very good system with some good outcomes from what we learnt from that. Sorry. Now, the project, we then had, there was a change of operations within the recycler, and a third party was brought into the program, and they ran a pilot at Melbourne market, but that ran into problems because of contamination with other sorts of plastics. And the project was effectively, we were notified that it had been parked in February 23. We were told there was great potential, but the logistics needed to be worked out because one of the problems that we learned with the pilot was that we needed to compact the plastic. To make it viable, we needed to concentrate the plastic that was being collected by trucks so that it stacked up economically. Then the project actually relaunched in 23 at a wholesaler, but we were not involved or notified about that project. What do we learn from that project? That we have a fantastic support within the industry for a project of this, for a recycling program of this nature. The plastic needs to be compacted for transport. You can see in the image there, big volumes, low weight. And so wherever the plastic was being collected from needed to be baled and compacted before it was transported. Looking at the volumes that were being collected with shops, the volume is there to make it a viable program. Good communication and signage is absolutely essential to avoid problems of contamination. And it needs to be more than just a sign. It was the engagement with the florists that really got those messages, and having the website was really good too. We discovered that some imported sleeves were coming in with a lamination on them, which makes printing more cost effective. And that was a concern for other recyclers that we discussed, that we approached, who weren't dealing in large volumes, and therefore it contaminated the overall recycling stock. Collaboration is absolutely key to these problems. This is a system problem. It's involving multiple different industries and players, and for a program to work effectively, there must be there must be good collaboration and good communication between all parties. Everyone has to be involved in problem solving, and ultimately these programs profit can't be the main driver, because this is an environmental problem that we're effectively trying to solve, and the environmental value has not been factored into the sleeve chain to this point. It's important that this program of this nature is developed, because there is packaging reform happening, the regulations are changing, and reporting requirements, Scope 3 emissions, will include packaging eventually. And it's a really great opportunity for industry to get ahead and set something up. Further delays mean further costs financially and environmentally. We're now in a situation where there is an opportunity for collaboration with a different recycler, because we now have this fantastic opportunity to close the actual loop on sleeves, because we now have manufacturers producing sleeves out of 100% recycled plastic. And that's where Yasmin's story enters the webinar. So I think that was my last slide. Yeah, so maybe I'll hand it over to Yasmin or Anne-Maree.
Right. I'll just thanks, Rita. That was a great summary. And I guess we know across all of agriculture that the challenges that you've raised are common to other industries, particularly around collection and logistics. Also in relation to contamination, that is a real problem, and the regulation side of things. I think the landscape of recyclers has changed significantly in the last 5 years, so that's a real opportunity, as you've said, if we can get those recyclers to take the products and then turn them into similar type products is a great solution. So we'll hear about what's happening in New Zealand from Yasmin. So Yasmin, if you'd like to do your presentation.
Yes, thank you. Rita has set that up quite nicely. So I'll just talk a bit about, sorry, what we're doing in New Zealand. So what we've done is we've, pretty much put in practice what Rita has just talked about with those systems and trying to close that loop. So I've set up a collection point in our two biggest flower auctions in Auckland and Wellington, where florists and growers can bring back their flower sleeves in plastic. We collect that and then recycle it, and we've remanufactured that into 100% recycled flower sleeves. So we're just trying to make doing the right thing the easy option, and to provide florists and growers with a good option, because it is so hard when nothing has been set up and there is no easy initiative for people to join. So I'll just touch a bit about how I sort of got started on this. So my parents are flower growers, and growing up I used to sleeve the flowers in plastic, and then once I got a bit older I got a job at the flower auction in Auckland, which is the biggest one here in New Zealand, and that's when I really saw the big plastic problem with all the flower buckets and plastic together, and I would struggle to sleep at night, sort of thinking, you know, where's all this plastic going in? It doesn't seem like anyone is doing really much about it. So I spoke to my dad and I said, you use too much plastic, you've got to change that. Can we change the paper? And he said, yep, as long as you do all of the work. So we changed to paper wraps, and I thought that was all right, reducing the amount of plastic, because I naturally thought paper is much better than plastic. But kind of long story short, decided that paper is actually not that much better than plastic if you don't take into account where it's ending up. So I saw his paper in the bin one day, and I thought, where's that paper going? That paper is still going to landfill. And I looked into it and I said, what happens to paper in landfill? And it can't compost properly because there's not enough air. So what happens is it actually produces methane, which is 26 times more potent than CO2. So although when we use plastic, we can see it in our environment and it is left behind, paper we can't quite see. It turns into an invisible gas, but it does also affect our climate and that sort of thing. So I thought that's not a long-term solution. You're still in that sort of linear thinking that Rita touched on, you make it, you use it, and then you throw away and forget about it. So I did a lot more digging. I thought there must be a better way, and that's when I kind of came across this circular thinking and wanting to close the loop, the idea of collecting that flower plastic, we recycling it. Like Rita said, it's a very highly recyclable material, which is amazing. So why aren't we collecting it? So I thought we've got to do something about that. And then because it's so highly recyclable, it's actually quite easy to then reproduce 100% material from that recycled material. So that's what we've implemented in New Zealand. It is still very small and kind of just starting to get somewhere with it now. But yeah, we've got quite a few florists on board in our 2 biggest cities, and a lot of interest from around the country, but we just can't get the rest of the country involved just yet. We haven't set up a nationwide network. That's our biggest problem that we're sort of working on right now, is trying to get the rest of the country involved, and there is interest from florists, which is really exciting. So yes, we do collect that recycled material, and that comes through the Auckland auction, and that's my dad goes there with flowers 3 times a week, so we use his truck to bring that plastic back to his site. So we're not actually we're using existing transport lines to bring back that plastic, kind of thinking about everything in our carbon footprint and that sort of thing, and trying to utilize what's already being the processes that are already happening to try and make this work. I guess when you do collect the plastic, you're not only reducing the amount of plastic going to landfill, but you're also, by making 100% recycled sleeves and making that product available, you're also reducing the reliance on virgin plastic. So I guess it's 2 birds with 1 stone, and you are reducing quite a bit of plastic, which is awesome. Next slide, please. Perfect. So we've collected almost 5 tons now, which doesn't sound like a lot, but we do hand sort everything to make sure that recycled material is as clean as possible and as high grade as possible. So we've recently almost hit that 5-ton milestone, which is great. And I guess the industry in New Zealand is much smaller than in Australia. So we've worked out it's about 200 tonne of single-use sleeves that go through the New Zealand market. So it is quite a bit smaller than in Aussie. And I think that's one of our biggest challenges, is the economies of scale. Next slide, please. Yes, and I guess another challenge that we've sort of faced is getting that 100% recycled sleeves, as you can see in the photo, is not clear and it's not see-through, not like your typical sort of sleeve that you do see. And it has been, I would say, the most common comment about the actual look of the sleeve itself. And there has been a bit of hesitation for growers to kind of switch to using a more opaque sort of sleeve. But I did do a survey with florists. I was very curious to hear what they thought, and if sleeve clarity actually mattered to them when they were buying their flowers. And we got a lot of positive response. Pretty much everyone said they would still buy flowers in recycled sleeves, and most people said they'd actually prefer sleeves that are recycled. And there are a few responses there on the slide that you can have a quick read through, but one that I thought was, that summed everything up really well was product quality, not presentation. And I guess flowers are so beautiful and they speak for themselves. Sorry, that the material around them is just purely for that protection. So I guess if we can kind of choose to use a material or a sleeve that is more sustainable, then I guess that aligns with I guess the value of the industry, and also what florists want and what customers want. We are kind of seeing that shift of people do want to see a solution to the issue, and that has been quite a prominent issue for a wee while now, and people are kind of thinking, oh, it's not sustainable long term and there must be a better solution. So pretty cool that we've got a lot of great feedback and hope from there that we can sort of change the industry and the waste and I guess the waste system of the industry and that sort of thing. But I guess something important to touch on is that although that the collection and recycling and remanufacturing and this closed loop system of plastic might be a really good one to implement across the industry for most growers and most florists and that sort of thing, I'll just mention, I think that is also, there is no one size fits all to packaging for flowers. I think a really important thing to understand is the cycle of materials and what they're made of, how they're made, and what's the sort of life cycle on the other end of the sleeves and that sort of thing. And I think paper, there is definitely a place for paper. And I liked when Rita talked about the rose grower sort of using paper for the customers. I guess that's real easy for your customer to pop that in their compost. If you know that your customers are composting, then paper is a great option. But if you know that they're not and they are regular customers to your shop, then setting up a plastic collection point might be great because you know they're taking the sleeve off at home, and if you just tell them, oh, if you bring that back when you buy your next bunch of flowers and pop it in the bin, then you know that sleeve can live another life and another life after that. So I think it's really important to understand materials and that sort of thing. I think that's applicable not only to floristry, but sort of everything. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I think our biggest sort of challenges are, yeah, economies of scale in New Zealand. We are such a small country and a small industry that, yeah, making things economical is quite challenging. But I think, yeah, it's still very worth doing and, yeah, still very important. And I guess we still have 200 tonnes per year, which is a huge amount. So that's a big goal that we want to work towards, collecting as much of that as possible. Another issue, I think, or challenge that we're facing is, yeah, the education around plastic and how to use it responsibly and kind of switching that mindset from plastic is terrible and we can't use it for anything to plastic does have a place as long as we think about how we use it, how it's collected and that sort of thing. And I think once we do set up systems like this and plastic is used responsibly, it can actually be a game changer for sustainability. I guess changing a whole industry is not easy at all. It's yeah, it takes a lot and it will take a lot of time for people to kind of adapt to new ways of doing things and that sort of thing. But I think the more we talk about it, the more we sort of have conversations like this and share our knowledge with fellow florists and customers and yeah, kind of help them understand the issue and what we're trying to achieve, and that, you know, goes from one mouth to another and then I guess things grow slowly but surely, and I guess, yeah, telling a friend about this sort of stuff and helping them understand. I think if everybody understands and is a bit educated about the problem, then we can all put our minds together and create a awesome solution. We have such a beautiful industry, so I think it is important to protect it as well. So I'll leave it there and
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Yasmin. Some key messages there around just starting to think differently about how we use our materials, which I think is really critical, and also that collaboration, working across the supply chain within the industry. So I'd like to hand over now to Ingrid, who's going to give us a real life example of their journey from Jonima Flowers and how they've looked at plastics and what some of the challenges have been along the way. So thanks, Ingrid.
Hi. So it was great hearing from Yasmin to hear what she's had to say and what she's experienced. She's probably, talks about a lot of things that we think about when we first started on our farm. We've been in, well, my husband and myself have been in, ourselves as Jonima Flowers have been in the industry for 20 years, but our husband is third generation. And he's seen that whole evolution where there was no plastic at all, where things were tied in string and, going to market that way, to seeing everything put in plastic, in plastic sleeves. We've not used plastic sleeves in our production of the way that we grow, would be now probably over 8 years now. We just straight away when we were doing it, we realized that yes, we're putting a plastic sleeve on, it was going to market and was being taken off and they're, straight in the bin. So it was that, there wasn't that system of where it was going to. So there wasn't a closed loop system. We, for ourselves, found that it was better. We decided to go down the route of wrapping with paper. We do that on things that need to be done. We don't do it on flowers that we don't think it needs to be done for. also, when we're hitting at a wholesale level, we also don't wrap individually as well. So we try to do then customers are bulk buying. So then we then wrap also in like bundles of 3 or bundles of 5. So then we're also reducing how we're, the amount of packaging that we're using. The reason that we also use paper is because we have a closed system on our farm. So we want it to be something that we do composting so that we can also compost as well. And we found that also with our consumers, so both on a florist level or on a retail level, we find that they are happy to, you know what I mean? They're trying to also find a system as well where, answering those recyclable issues. I think generally as a whole, like Yasmin said, if there was in the industry in Australia, like in the markets, if there was a system where there is recyclable, where florists could come in, where wholesalers could, come in, growers could come in, where they're recycling, there is a system, they would use it, in a heartbeat. If there was something there, it would be used, I think the struggle is that people don't find, that they can't find an alternative, to what they're using. And I think that's the biggest thing. We've made the conscious choice that we don't want to use plastics until there is, a system that we're happy with, that there is that system where we can recycle. And, until that time we choose to use paper in what we're doing. And like I said, we use it as minimal as we can. Again, packaging more in bulk rather than individually as well reduces a whole lot too in what we're doing. So yeah, we've just found, and also we've had to adjust in what we're doing as well. So we've had to, like, because we're not using plastic too, it's again, we're not packing as tight as well. So little adjustments that we've had to make in terms of how we do things, we found in our growing and in our production side of things. And probably maybe because we are smaller, we'd go direct to wholesale. So we sell at Sydney Flower Market. We have the opportunity where you were talking about that shipping issues. It's going from, the big growers where it's going, to supply chains, it's going to supermarkets and so forth to retail, and they need that packaging. At the moment, because we are smaller, we're finding that we're able to use that brown packaging or no packaging because we don't have those as bigger transport issues. So obviously, again, finding that recycling system that would work where we're knowing that it's you. I'm sure everyone in the industry would, gravitate it instantaneously to it. So yeah.
Ingrid, has it changed over time, your customer base? Have you seen some customers be attracted to the way you're doing things or others leave?
I think what's really interesting, my husband says this a lot. He says he has this image. People seem to think because it's in plastic, it's a better product. It comes down to just this perception of aesthetics. But really, when you're selling on a house and it's just obviously shipping, and it obviously depends where it's going. If it's going to the retail person, it has to look a certain way. But in between that whole supply chain, how the flowers are presented really doesn't, you know what I mean? That really doesn't matter. It's when, we're not hitting a retail level where it has to look packaged beautifully. What's important is the product. Yeah. So, whether it's in a plastic sleeve or not in a plastic, really in the end, it's the quality of that product that is going to sell. So he sort of says sometimes just people just generally think, oh, if it's in plastic, it's a better product.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which necessarily might not be the case. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of, so it's just changing that mindset that, yes, it doesn't need to be, that's not the only way that something needs to be packaged. Like flowers don't just need to be packaged that way. There's lots of different choices that you can use in doing that. So
you mentioned that a lot of your product is traveling less distance, but I think there has been some adaptation that you've done to allow for potential damage during transport.
Yeah, we do. So we don't package, like, so obviously things get transported in water and in buckets. We put less in the bucket. So there is not that crushing so much happening, you know, the damage happening with the flowers. We also use rubber bands, so then those rubber bands can be recycled or returned back. So even, you know, having them rubber bands returning back to us, obviously the rubber bands get reused, the florist can reuse the rubber bands. Then even saying to the customer as well, at a retail level, they'll obviously have a whole stockpile of rubber bands, bring them back to the florist, you know what I mean? Or bring them back to the, you know, whoever you've bought them from. So there's that recycling then system happening with those rubber bands. So we sometimes find, you know, even just having a double rubber band around the product, rather than using a sleeve, also helps contain that product nicely together. So just little things like that, little tweaking and adjustments. Yeah.
So what's your next big change? Do you think you've probably arrived at where you wanted to, or
look, I would really, like I said, I'd really great to see in the industry if there was some sort of recycling program. And I know florists would be 110% on board with that. You know, they're the ones that come at the end of the day that are ripping all these sleeves off, and they've got a whole bin, you know, full of plastic there, and they're like, you know, what do I do with it? Where does it go? Do you know what I mean? So I think it really having a system or education system of where it can go. You know, it's exactly the same with paper. You know, obviously, you know, if it's paper, they know whether it can be recycled, whether it can be composted. It's really educating then the consumer. And the same with plastics, whether it is recyclable, yes, it can go. This is where we, you know, these are, you know, the recycling bin or whatever that it needs to go to. I think education in really developing that system so that we can have, clear ideas of where to go with it. That would change. So I think that would make it easier. That would make it easier for obviously growers. Growers are going to choose what is the, you know, obviously they look down to the cost of things, but obviously also what's easeability for them in protecting their product. But if they know that there's options there, you know, choice of something that's not to something that is and is just as comparable, and there is a recycling program for it, I'm sure they'd choose that option because people are wanting that. People are looking at, you know, the end effect of things, you know, and us as a grower, we're also always looking at every choice that we make. What is the end choice of that? What is the end lifespan of that product, you know, and what impact is that going to have? So can it be reused? Can it be recycled? Can it be repurposed? If it doesn't fit those criteria, then we won't use it. And I think a lot of, you know, people are understanding more and more that it's important, the environmental impacts of things in what we do. And if they had that choice, I think they would, you know, go there. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks. I'm going to open it up for questions for Ingrid, Yasmin, and Rita. And I guess, Ingrid, from your end, it's really focusing on that collaborative approach across the industry and coming up with solutions where consumers and also others throughout the supply chain have choice and can make those well-informed decisions, I guess, is critical as well. So are there any questions from the panelists? Just put your hand up or else just take yourself off mute and we'll make sure that you can ask the questions. I guess I had a question for Yasmin while people think about what they want to ask. Yasmin, you talked about the recyclers, and I just guess just the economics of recycling is a bit of a challenge, particularly at the moment virgin plastics declining in cost. Are the recyclers where you're taking your material to, are they paying you for that material or is it no cost?
Yeah, so as long as I sort it, we do get paid for it. So I do a lot of time into actually making sure it's clean and that sort of thing, and then we do get paid at the other end. It's a whole lot, and we do get more money for if it's baled, kind of like what Rita talked about before as well. If it's baled, it's a higher quality. So we do. Otherwise, if we kind of just collected and didn't go through, that would just be dropped off for free.
Okay, so you are getting paid for the value of the product. That's great to know. Mel, you've got a question?
Yeah, hi. My question's for Yasmin. I just wondered if the sleeves can be endlessly recycled. So your recycled sleeves can be recycled again and again and again, or is there a limit to how many times they can be recycled?
Yeah, that's a good question. There is a limit. So it is paper can be recycled about 7 times, and then PP sort of plastic can be 10 to 15 times, so about double what paper can. So yeah, at the end, I guess the polymers, they break down too much to then recycle. But I guess when you do have a product that ours is 100% recycled, but the benefit of using a split product of virgin and recycled material, that then sort of can prolong the life of those recycled polymers, if that makes sense. So we did try a product that was 40% recycled, and then the other 60 was raw virgin plastic. So that could then probably mixing it can the lifespan, but about 10 to 15 times.
Sure. Great. That's I was wondering about that one too, Mel. Just in Australia, we do have pretty good collection and recycling systems for paper. So in all metropolitan areas. So from the consumer's end, paper would always be recycled. I think that's a given. I'm not sure if that's the same in New Zealand.
Yeah. Usually paper is got very good paper recycling.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Great. Rita, I'm wondering from your point of view, what would you like to see happen in the industry from a plastic sleeves point of view?
Yeah, look, I think at this point there's no question that the interest and enthusiasm is there to work towards it, and I think that one of the things that we saw with when we had good system of communication in place, that we can address contamination.
Yeah.
And that is the biggest obstacle to effective recycling programs. So the opportunity now, I think, is to get a recycler on board who would want to work to get to developing this further, because I think so many of the parts are in play. It just becomes a problem solving exercise from a logistics point of view. And we know that there's value and that sort of pressure to increase recycled content by utilize recycled content by manufacturers of products. So the demand for recycled plastic of this purity will only grow.
Yes.
And speaking to just talking about, Yasmin was mentioning about the recycling. What we have in the sleeve product is a it's effectively a virgin plastic. It is a very clear, high quality material. So it's very desirable from the perspective of recyclers. So yeah, it's about, I would love to see a recycler come on board so that we can develop that further.
Sure. Great. And I think we've been doing work in this area for a number of years, and often we feel like a matchmaking service. We're really just connecting industry people with recyclers and making sure that the education around the type of material that they need is clear to the agricultural sector.
Well, the SFN is definitely single and open to a relationship in that sense.
Yeah, great. That's good to know. Ingrid, if you had a magic wand, is there anything besides that sort of more collaborative approach, anything that you'd like to see change either at the market end or in your production side? What's the biggest thing that you'd like to see change?
I suppose if there was like I said, if we had in place that recycling program in place, I know like the big flower hubs, obviously, in each of the states or whatever. It's a great avenue as a collection point, to then have that system happening. So getting someone on board and collaborating and doing something like that would be, fantastic as a whole for everyone, and for the whole industry. So yeah.
Yeah, great. Just checking with others if there's any questions. Again, just take yourself off mute or put up your hand, and we can make sure that your question is heard. Yasmin, I guess the cost always comes up about are these, what's the relative cost compared to the traditional sleeves?
There's a good question, and I think that's normally a barrier that people kind of always assume that they're going to be more expensive. Tried really hard to stay competitive, so our sleeves are probably the same price or can even be slightly cheaper than the raw version, at least in New Zealand. So finding that, growers are saying that our pricing is really good. So that we try and, I guess coming from a family of flower growers and kind of understanding that, I want to make that it's as easy as possible, because I know, the cents do sort of add up and that sort of thing. So we try and stay as competitive as possible.
Right. Yeah, well, that I'm sure growers will be very happy to hear that. So I think unless there's any other questions, that's been a really informative session, and thanks to our three speakers for talking about their experience and journey in relation to how we can solve this plastic sleeve issue. The things that have probably come up the most have been that collaboration across the whole supply chain, or we can come up with solutions if we know where each part of the supply chain is coming from. There's also, as Rita mentioned, things around contamination and collection logistics that they're solvable. We can work on those, but we need to put our mind to how we can solve some of those issues. I think the landscape around recyclers, more recyclers coming on board, greater volumes being sought after is really important. And then the last one, I guess, is around that regulation piece and what part government plays to encourage some of these activities and to encourage change in behaviour. So thanks everyone for participating. And as I said, this is the last of our series of webinars. The material will be available on our website, and Ellie will send out an email with contact details and also a recording of the webinar. So thanks very much.